The first time I realized she'd blocked my number, I was standing in the grocery store aisle with a basket full of dinner ingredients and a sinking feeling in my chest. My thumb hovered over the green call button, but it went straight to voicemail again. No ring, no chance to leave a message. Just a cold automated, "The person you are trying to reach is not accepting calls at this time." I stared at my phone screen, the digital glow reflecting my own disbelief. For a moment, I stood there like a fool, frozen between the canned tomatoes and the overpriced pasta. It was such a small thing, a phone call, but it felt like a slap in the face, like she was telling me without a word that I didn't matter anymore. I'd always known she had a way of cutting people out when she was done with them. I'd seen her do it to old friends, coworkers, even family members who dared to question her. But I never thought she'd do it to me. I thought I was different. I thought she valued what we had. I was wrong. I left my basket in the aisle and walked out into the parking lot, the sun setting behind the rows of cars. My keys felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door, the quiet of the car suddenly overwhelming. It wasn't just the block that stung, it was the history behind it. The countless times I'd been the one to pick up the phone first, to send the first text to smooth things over when she got moody or distant. She always liked to be the center of the world, and for too long I let her be mine. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with 1,000 what-ifs and could-bes. The streetlights flickered on as I pulled into my driveway, the glow casting long shadows across the front porch. I sat there for a minute, my hands gripping the steering wheel, the weight of her rejection settling over me like a suffocating blanket. How dare she block me, after everything I'd done for her, after every time I'd covered for her, when rent was late, or when the electricity bill went unpaid, because she forgot. I'd been the one to make sure the lights stayed on, that the water ran, that the internet kept humming, so she could keep living her picture-perfect life online. And now she had the nerve to cut me off like I was nothing. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. I knew I was being dramatic, knew that I should just let it go and move on. But the truth was, this wasn't just about a blocked number. It was about all the little ways she'd chipped away at me, one selfish decision at a time. I walked into the house, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet, both comforting and infuriating. This was my space, my name on the lease, my name on the bills. But somehow she'd managed to make it feel like hers too, like I was just a guest in my own home. I dropped my keys on the hall table and stared at the stack of envelopes waiting there, water power internet, all with my name on them. All of them paid by me month after month, while she acted like it was some kind of favor she was doing by living here. I picked up the water bill, my thumb tracing the printed words. It was due in 3 days, another thing she'd have conveniently forgotten if I hadn't caught it. I could practically hear her voice in my head, airy and dismissive. "Oh, you're just so good with that stuff. You're more organized." Organized. That's what she called it when I picked up her slack. Organized. Like I was some kind of personal assistant, not the person paying to keep the water running. I felt the anger rise in my chest, hot and sharp. She might have blocked my number, but she couldn't block the reality of those bills. The utilities were all in my name, every last one of them. And suddenly, I realized I had something she didn't. Control. I sank down into the old armchair by the window, the leather worn soft by years of use. I stared out at the street, the passing cars, the kids riding bikes in the last of the evening light. My mind was already racing with possibilities. She'd cut me off, but I still had the power to make her listen. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, maybe it was time to remind her that she couldn't erase me so easily. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my call history, every unanswered call, every ignored message. My fingers hovered over her contact, the name still there, even if the line was dead. For a second, I almost deleted it, but I didn't. Instead, I flipped to the Notes app and started jotting down every account she'd ever used, every little piece of her life that was only possible because I'd been there to keep the lights on. Electricity, water, internet, all in my name, all paid by me, all about to become her responsibility. I could almost see the look on her face when the first bill landed in her inbox. She'd probably roll her eyes, blame me for being petty, but deep down she'd know. She'd know this was her doing. A small smile tugged at the corners of my lips. It wasn't about revenge, at least not entirely. It was about fairness, about not letting her keep taking without consequence. She could block my number, but she couldn't block the reality of what she owed me. I sat there in the fading light, the quiet of the house wrapping around me like a promise. Tomorrow, I'd start making the calls, forwarding everything she thought she'd left behind. But tonight, I let myself savor the quiet strength building in my chest. She thought she could cut me out with the swipe of her finger, but she was about to learn that some ties don't break that easily, and I was done letting her pretend I didn't matter. The next morning, the world looked the same as it always did. The sun rose over the trees in the backyard, turning the sky a soft gold. The birds were chirping, and the coffee smelled just as warm and familiar. But everything felt different inside me. My phone was still silent, her number still blocked, but I didn't feel the sting of that rejection as much as I had last night. Now it felt like fuel. I spent the early hours in the kitchen, the clink of the coffee spoon against the mug, a steady rhythm as I planned my next move. I pulled out a notebook from the junk drawer, flipping to a fresh page. I wrote her name at the top, her neat handwriting still echoing in my mind from all the times she'd left little notes around the house. Don't forget to buy milk. Can you grab more candles, like I was her personal errand boy? Not anymore. Under her name, I listed every utility tied to my account. Electricity, water, gas, internet, even the streaming subscriptions she always forgot to pay for. My pen moved quickly, the list getting longer, as I remembered all the ways she'd leaned on me, always so quick to smile and say, "You're so good at this stuff." As if that made it okay for her to sit back and let me carry the weight. I stared at that list, feeling the weight of it settle on my shoulders. For years, I'd let her weave those strings around me, soft and subtle, until I was tangled in a web of my own making. But now, those strings weren't pulling me down anymore. They were giving me the leverage I needed to stand up. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness sharp and satisfying, and picked up the phone. I called the electric company first. The woman on the other end was polite, her voice warm and understanding, as I explained that I needed to update some information on the account. "No problem," she said. "Whose name would you like to forward the bills to?" I almost laughed at how easy it was. I gave her Vanessa's name and email address, a small shiver of satisfaction running down my spine as I imagined her expression when the first bill landed in her inbox. She could block my number, but she couldn't block the system that kept the lights on. Next was the water company. Same story, same polite conversation, same quick update. With each call, I felt stronger, like I was taking back a piece of myself that I didn't even know I'd lost. I saved the internet for last. That one felt the most personal, so many nights spent sitting across from each other on the couch, her scrolling through social media, while I worked to make sure the Wi-Fi never cut out. All those quiet evenings, when I thought we were building something together, and she was really just using me as a stepping stone. Done, the customer service rep said, her voice bright and cheerful. "The account's been updated. Anything else I can help with?" "No," I said softly. "That's all, thank you." I set the phone down and took a deep breath. The quiet of the house settled around me like a warm blanket, but this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt earned. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just the caretaker of someone else's comfort. I was taking care of myself. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, wiping down the kitchen counters, organizing the pantry. It wasn't just about making the space neat, it was about making it mine again. Every swipe of the cloth was a small act of defiance, a silent promise that I wouldn't let her control my story anymore. By noon, I was feeling lighter, like the house itself was breathing easier. I went out to the garden, the sun warm on my skin, and pulled a few stubborn weeds from the flower beds. The roses I'd planted years ago were blooming bright and defiant, their color a sharp contrast to the quiet determination in my chest. I thought about Vanessa, about how she'd always laughed when I spent hours out here in the dirt. "You're wasting your time," she'd say, her tone airy and dismissive. "No one cares about flowers anymore." But I cared. Because those roses were a reminder that even in the toughest soil, something beautiful could take root and thrive. As I worked, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't recognize it, but I knew. Vanessa. She couldn't block me on everything, no matter how hard she tried. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered, my voice calm. Hello. For a moment, there was silence. Then, her voice sharp and incredulous. Did you really just forward the utilities to my account? I didn't let her anger shake me. Yes, I said evenly. I'm done paying for your comfort while you treat me like I'm invisible. Her laugh was hollow forced. You're being petty, she snapped. You think this is going to hurt me? No, I said softly. It's not about hurting you. It's about taking back what's mine. She fell silent, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. She was so used to me backing down to me, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. But not this time. You'll regret this, she said finally, her voice low and cold. I smiled, a quiet strength in the curve of my lips. No, I said. I won't. I hung up and let the phone drop to the porch, railing my hands, trembling, but my heart steady. She could threaten me all she wanted, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd found my voice, and I wasn't going to let her silence it again. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, I sat on the porch steps and watched the light shift and change. This was my home, my life, my rules. Vanessa might have blocked my number, but she couldn't block the truth. And she couldn't block me from taking back my power, one bill, one decision, one act of quiet defiance at a time. Tomorrow, I'd keep going. There were still things to do, locks to change, accounts to close, boundaries to build. But tonight, I let myself sit in the glow of my own courage, the sweet relief of standing up for myself for once. And as I looked out over the yard, the roses blooming bright and stubborn in the last light of day, I knew this was just the beginning. The morning after Vanessa's call, the world felt clearer, sharper, like the air itself had been scrubbed clean of her manipulations. I woke up to the sun streaming through the curtains, warming my skin, as if the universe itself was telling me I'd done the right thing. For so long, I'd carried the weight of her presence in this house, her laughter echoing in the halls, her criticism lingering in every corner. But not anymore. I stretched and sat up in bed, the old quilt bunching around my waist. My heart felt steady calm. I'd spent too many nights lying awake, wondering if I was overreacting or if I was just too sensitive. But the truth was so much simpler. I wasn't the one who was wrong. I was just the one who'd finally had enough. I padded downstairs, the smell of coffee already filling the kitchen. I'd set the machine to brew, automatically, a small luxury I'd always appreciated, even when Vanessa mocked me for it. So domestic, she'd say with a smirk. So old-fashioned. But there was power in the rituals we choose for ourselves. Power in the quiet comfort of morning coffee, in the small ways we say, "This is mine. This is my life." I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen table, the steam curling around my fingers. I pulled out the notebook I'd started the day before, flipping through the pages filled with notes and scribbles. Each line was a record of the ways she'd tried to turn my life into her playground. Each word was a reminder that I wasn't powerless. I had the proof, the patience, and now the determination. I thought back to our last conversation, her voice tight with anger, the way she'd called me petty. It almost made me laugh. Petty na petty was ignoring the bills while she lived like a queen. Petty was pretending the past didn't matter because it was inconvenient. What I was doing wasn't petty. It was necessary. It was justice. I sipped my coffee and picked up my phone, scrolling through the notifications. One caught my eye, a payment confirmation from the electric company addressed to Vanessa. My heart gave a little jolt of satisfaction. It was real now, no longer just an idea in my head. She couldn't pretend she didn't see me anymore. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the calm settle over me. Then I got to work. I spent the morning going through old emails, gathering every scrap of evidence that tied her to the utilities she'd used and abused, late notices she'd ignored, payment reminders I'd covered without a second thought. It was all there, a paper trail of her entitlement and my misplaced trust. Each email I forwarded felt like a small act of defiance. She wanted to block me, fine. Let her deal with the fallout of ignoring what she owed. Let her feel the weight of every unpaid bill that I'd carried for too long. By noon, I felt lighter than I had in months. I made myself a sandwich and sat on the back porch, the garden blooming around me. The roses were in full color now, their petals bright against the green leaves. I ran my fingers along one of the blossoms, the thorns pricking gently at my skin. Beauty and pain, side by side. Just like life. As I ate, I thought about the years I'd spent trying to keep the peace. The way I'd let her slide when she was late with rent, or when she snapped at me for things that weren't my fault. I'd told myself I was being patient, being kind. But kindness isn't letting someone walk all over you. Kindness is knowing your worth and demanding that others respect it. My phone buzzed again, another message from a mutual friend. "What's going on with Vanessa?" they asked. "She's been ranting about you all morning." I smiled a small secret smile. "Just setting the record straight," I typed back. And I was. No more apologizing for things I hadn't done. No more pretending her version of the story was the truth. That afternoon, I decided to tackle the internet bill, the last piece of the puzzle. I called the provider, the hold music, a steady hum in my ear as I waited. When the customer service rep finally answered, I explained what I needed. Calm. Collected. In control. "Of course," she said after a pause. "I'll make sure the account is forwarded to the new user." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate it." I hung up and sat back in my chair, the weight of months of frustration lifting off my shoulders like a heavy coat. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe. Like I was finally living in a house that was mine again, not just in name, but in spirit. I spent the rest of the day in small acts of reclamation. I cleaned out the fridge, tossing out the overpriced organic groceries she'd insisted on, but never actually ate. I moved the furniture back to where I liked it, the arrangement that made the room feel warm and welcoming, instead of cold and curated, for her Instagram feed. I even dusted off the old record player in the living room and let the crackling sound of vinyl fill the air. As the music played, I danced barefoot on the worn wood floors, a soft, triumphant rhythm that was all mine. The house felt alive again, each room echoing with my laughter instead of her criticism. I knew there would be more to deal with angry messages, maybe even a confrontation if she showed up. But for now, I let myself enjoy the feeling of freedom. That night, I lit a candle on the kitchen table and sat down with a glass of wine. The flickering light cast soft shadows on the walls, and I let the quiet wash over me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. And I knew this was only the beginning. Vanessa might have blocked my number, but she couldn't block my strength. She couldn't block the simple fact that I was done playing the fool in her story. From here on out, I was writing my own ending. I took a sip of wine and let the taste settle on my tongue, rich and warm. Outside, the crickets were singing in the dark, a soft chorus of possibility. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, the last of the day's worries slipping away. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, I knew that. But I also knew I was ready. Ready to keep moving forward, to keep fighting for what was mine. Ready to keep showing her that she couldn't erase me no matter how hard she tried. I smiled in the quiet, a small, sure smile. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the start of taking back everything she'd tried to steal from me. The next morning, the air felt different, crisp and alive, like the world was brimming with possibility. I woke up early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, and let myself lie there for a moment, breathing in the quiet. I wasn't used to this peace, not after months of feeling like a guest in my own life. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I got up and made myself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, as the first rays of light spilled across the worn tile floor. I took a slow sip, savoring the warmth, and let my mind wander to the day ahead. There were still things to do, more calls to make, more boundaries to set. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, instead of just trying to stay afloat. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the light dance across the roses in the garden. Their color seemed even brighter today, a defiant splash of red and pink against the green. It felt like they were blooming just for me, a silent promise that even the hardest soil can grow something beautiful if you're willing to fight for it. My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking me from my thoughts. I picked it up, half expecting to see another angry message from Vanessa. But it was a different name this time, an old friend, someone I hadn't talked to in months. Hey, the message read. I heard what's been going on. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I stared at the words for a moment, my chest tightening with unexpected emotion. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that, how much it mattered to know someone saw what I was doing, understood why I was doing it. I typed back a simple, thank you, and set the phone down, feeling a small weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe I never really had been. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of small victories. I called the trash service and transferred the account, another quiet act of reclaiming my space. I updated the subscriptions she'd been using, the ones she always insisted were just easier to keep in my name. Each step felt like peeling away a layer of her influence, one deliberate cut after another. Around midday, I decided it was time to change the locks. It felt symbolic, like the final step in making this house truly mine again. I drove to the hardware store, the drive peaceful and bright under the clear blue sky. I picked out a new set of locks, sturdy and simple, and felt a surge of satisfaction as I carried them to the register. When I got home, I set to work immediately, the rhythmic click of the screwdriver against the doorframe, a steady beat in the quiet afternoon. Each turn of the screw felt like a promise to myself, to this house, to the life I was building. By the time I finished, my hands were sore, but my heart was light. The new locks gleamed in the sunlight, a small but powerful symbol of my resolve. I took a step back and looked at the door, the fresh key warm in my palm. She couldn't walk back in whenever she wanted anymore. She couldn't pretend this was still her playground. This was my home now, and I was done sharing it with anyone who didn't respect what that meant. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. I needed the fresh air, the chance to stretch my legs and clear my head. The streets were quiet, the houses bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. I nodded to the neighbors I passed, their smiles, warm and knowing. Word had gotten around small towns have a way of carrying stories like that, but there was no judgment in their eyes. Just quiet support, the kind that doesn't need words to feel real. I ended up at the little park, at the end of the street, the benches worn smooth by years of kids playing and parents watching over them. I sat down and let the sounds of the evening wash over me, the distant bark of a dog, the soft laughter of children playing tag in the grass. It felt peaceful, grounding, like a reminder that life goes on even when you're in the middle of a storm. I thought about everything that had led me here, the late-night arguments, the endless apologies, the way I'd always been the one to smooth things over. And I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that I deserved better, that I deserved more than just being the person who paid the bills and kept the peace. I deserved respect. I deserved to be heard. As the sun slipped below the horizon, I stood and made my way back home, my steps sure and steady on the cracked pavement. When I walked through the door, the house felt different, warmer somehow, like it was breathing with me alive, with the quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my notebook again, flipping to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote one word in bold letters: future. For so long, I'd let her dictate what that meant. But now it was mine to decide. I filled the page with plans, small dreams, and quiet hopes. Paint colors I'd always wanted to try, books I wanted to read, even a list of friends I hadn't seen in too long, people I wanted to invite back into my life now that I had space for them again. As I wrote, I felt a quiet joy blooming in my chest. This wasn't just about paying bills or changing locks. It was about taking back my life one choice at a time. The night settled in around me, the soft glow of the porch light spilling across the floor. I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair, the warmth of the moment wrapping around me like a promise. Vanessa had thought she could block me out, erase me with a single swipe on her phone. But she hadn't counted on my quiet strength, my steady resolve. She hadn't counted on the fact that when you push someone too far, they stop asking for permission and start taking back what's theirs. And as I sat there in the calm of my reclaimed home, I knew one thing for certain: she might have blocked my number, but she couldn't block me from moving forward, from claiming the life I'd always deserved. And tomorrow, I'd take another step, because this was just the beginning and I was ready for everything that came next. The morning after I changed the locks, I woke up feeling like the air itself was easier to breathe. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the same tense quiet that used to hang heavy in the walls whenever Vanessa was around. No, this quiet was peaceful. It felt earned. I got up and stretched, the sunlight spilling across my bed, warm and reassuring. As I walked downstairs, I thought about the moment I'd slipped the new key into the lock. For the first time, the satisfying click that had felt like music to my ears. It was a small thing maybe, but it meant everything. For the first time in years, I knew that when I turned that key, the door I opened would be mine and only mine. I poured a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, the steam curling around my fingers as I took a slow, steady breath. Today was going to be different. I could feel it. The phone rang mid-morning. I saw her name flash across the screen, and for a moment my hand hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. I wanted to hear what she had to say. I needed to hear it. I answered, my voice calm. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, the sound of her breathing jagged and tight. "You changed the locks," she said finally, her tone sharp with accusation. "I did," I said simply. She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're unbelievable. Do you have any idea how petty this is?" How childish. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the warmth steady me. "It's not petty," I said. "It's necessary. I'm not going to keep the door open for someone who doesn't respect me or this home." "You're so dramatic," she spat. "It's just a house." I felt a flicker of anger in my chest, but I kept my voice even. "No, it's not just a house. It's my home. And you don't get to treat it like your personal hotel anymore." She was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I could almost hear her calculating. She'd always been so good at twisting the narrative, turning everything back on me. But not this time. I was done playing the villain in her story. "You're going to regret this," she said finally, her voice low and cold. "I'm not going to just disappear." I let out a breath, my fingers drumming lightly against the mug. "I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to stop pretending that I owe you my life. Because I don't. Not anymore." She hung up without another word, and I set the phone down, my heart pounding but steady. I'd spent so long letting her words sink into my skin like barbs, but now they slid off like rain on glass. She could threaten me all she wanted, but I wasn't going to let her fear become mine. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning out the last of her things, clothes she'd left behind, the mismatched dishes she'd insisted on buying, because mine were too plain. I packed everything neatly into boxes and stacked them by the door, ready for her to pick up whenever she decided to stop pretending she still belonged here. As I worked, I felt lighter. Each box I taped shut was like closing the door on another chapter of my life, another piece of her hold over me. By the time I was done, the house felt bigger, brighter, like it was finally mine in a way it had never been before. Around midday, I got a text from a friend who'd heard about what happened. "You okay?" she asked. "I can come by if you need me." I smiled at the message, my heart warming at the thought. "I'm good," I typed back. "Actually, I'm better than good. I'm free." I spent the afternoon in the garden, the sun warm on my skin as I pulled weeds and trimmed the roses. The thorns scraped my hands, but I didn't mind. It was honest work, something real and grounded, something no one could take from me. As I worked, I thought about all the little ways I'd let her undermine me, every time I'd let her brush aside my concerns with a laugh or a dismissive wave of her hand. I thought about the way she'd always made me feel like I was too much, too emotional, too needy, too invested. But the truth was, I wasn't too much. I was exactly enough, and I was done apologizing for that. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset behind the trees. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the air soft and sweet, with the scent of blooming roses. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for her to come home and start another fight, another round of twisting my words into something ugly. I was just here, and that was enough. As the last light of day faded, my phone buzzed again, a new number, another attempt from her to reach me. I let it ring my lips, curling into a small, satisfied smile. She could keep trying, but I'd already decided I wasn't letting her back in. Not just into this house, but into my head, my heart, my peace. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair, the cool evening air brushing against my skin. I thought about the woman I'd been when she first moved in, hopeful maybe, a little naive, always so eager to make things work. I thought about how far I'd come, about how much I'd learned. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I'd be damned if I let anyone make me feel like a stranger in it ever again. As the stars blinked to life above me, I whispered into the darkness, a quiet promise to myself, I'm done. And with that simple declaration, I felt the last of her hold slip away. The next morning, I woke to the gentle glow of sunlight streaming through the curtains. The air smelled like fresh coffee and warm toast, a simple comfort that had always made this house feel like home. I lay there for a moment, listening to the birds singing outside, and let myself smile. It was different now. Everything was different. I got up and made my way to the kitchen, the quiet creak of the floorboards grounding me in the present. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam rising in soft curls, and stood at the window, watching the world come to life. The garden was still heavy with dew, the roses shining in the morning light, and I felt a quiet pride bloom in my chest. They were a testament to resilience. No matter how many storms they weathered, they always found a way to bloom again, just like me. I thought about Vanessa, how she'd tried to turn my home into her playground, how she'd used every trick she knew to make me doubt myself. But she hadn't counted on my quiet strength. She hadn't counted on the simple, unshakable truth that this house, this life, was mine. I spent the morning finishing the last of the small repairs I'd been putting off. I tightened loose screws, oiled squeaky hinges, and polished the old wooden banister until it gleamed. Each task felt like another small victory, another step in reclaiming not just my home, but my peace. When I was done, I stood in the doorway and looked around, my heart swelling with a feeling I hadn't let myself believe in for so long: pride. This was my sanctuary, no longer just a house, but a testament to my own stubborn, quiet strength. Later, I called a few friends and invited them over for dinner. It was time to fill this space with laughter and light again, to remind myself that I didn't have to do everything alone. As I cooked, the smells of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at home in my own skin. When my friends arrived, their smiles lit up the room. We ate and drank and talked late into the evening, the house echoing with warmth and laughter. It felt like a celebration of the house, of my freedom, of the simple, profound joy of taking back what was always mine. As the night wore on and my friends said their goodbyes, I walked them to the door, feeling the cool night air brush against my skin. The stars were bright above us, a quiet promise that the world was still full of possibility. After they left, I stood on the porch for a while, breathing in the scent of the roses and listening to the distant sounds of the night. The house behind me was quiet and warm, every corner echoing with the soft hum of peace. It was mine, truly, finally mine. I knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life always finds a way to test us, to ask if we're really as strong as we believe. But I was ready. Because this wasn't just about a house or a few unpaid bills. It was about knowing my worth, about standing up and saying I deserve to be here. As I turned and walked back inside, I felt a calm settle over me, a quiet certainty that no matter what came next, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Vanessa had blocked my number, but she hadn't blocked my resolve. She hadn't blocked my right to this home, to this life, to this new chapter I was writing for myself. I closed the door behind me, the soft click of the latch ringing like a promise in the stillness. I took one last look around, letting the peace of the moment fill me up. And with a quiet smile, I whispered to the darkness, "This is mine." Because it was, and no one could ever take it away from me again.